The Beggar was written by Anton Chekhov, which is the story of a poor alcoholic beggar named Lishkov who used to beg on roads as he was unable to find work. He resorted to begging in order to survive. One day, he met Sergey, a wealthy advocate, and asked him for some work. He was wearing a ragged, tattered overcoat and had dull, drunken eyes with a red spot on either cheek. He claimed that he had been a school teacher in a village earlier and lost his job due to a conspiracy against him. So, he started begging to feed himself and survive. Sergey immediately recalled that he had seen the beggar on another street the other day. At that time, he had said that he was a student who had been expelled. The lawyer was filled with disgust and threatened to hand over the beggar to the police for cheating people by telling lies. Hearing this, Lishkov broke down and admitted that he was lying to people so that they would take pity on him for his condition. He confessed that he used to sing in a Russian choir and was fired for his drinking habit. Hence, he requested Sergey to give him some work so that he could make a living for himself. Sergey asked him if he could chop wood for him at his house. Leshkov instantly agreed, and Sergey hastened and called out his cook, Olga, to take the poor man into the woodshed and let him chop wood. Olga did so as she looked at Lishkov with contempt. Although he had become very weak due to his drunkenness, he tried chopping wood as instructed. When Sergey looked at him, he felt sorry and ashamed of himself for making the sick man do menial labor in such a cold weather. An hour later, Olga informed that the wood had all been chopped. Sergey ordered her to give Leshkov half a ruble for his work. Eventually, he would come once in a month to do the work and leave after receiving his wage. Soon, Sergey moved to a new house and employed Lishkov, who was now a sober and courteous fellow, for packing and hauling the furniture. Although he used to shiver in the cold, he did his work properly. Seeing his dedication, Sergey offered him a cleaner employment and asked if he could write. Leshkov replied in the affirmative, and Sergey gave a letter to be sent to a friend where he would need to do some copy work. Leshkov did so, but he never returned to Sergey's place. 2 years passed, and one evening Sergey saw Leshkov at the ticket counter of a theater paying for his seat. He was well groomed and looked sophisticated. Sergey was astonished seeing his transformation and asked about him. Leshkov replied that he was working as a notary and was paid 35 rubles every month. Sergey was happy that he could help Leshkov become a responsible human being and felt good for showing him the right path. Leshkov thanked Sergey for his kindness and helping him when he was a mere beggar. Besides, he mentioned that he was more grateful to Olga for her compassionate nature. He revealed that she was the one who used to chop the wood that was assigned to him. Being a kind-hearted lady, she would give away the money to him for the wood chopping task done by her. Although she would often chide him, she would also weep at his poor condition. She had advised him to give up his alcoholism and was responsible for helping him to mend his ways. Owing to her kind words and noble deeds, Lishkov had a change of heart. He stopped drinking completely and started working hard to earn his livelihood. She set a right example before him, and he said that he would always remain indebted to her for her kindness and cooperation. Conclusion of the Beggar. The chapter The Beggar teaches students that if one has the will to work hard and reach a goal, with dedication and willpower one can achieve success in life. The Happy Prince Summary. The Happy Prince is a beautiful story written by Oscar Wilde. It is the tale of a sculpture of the Happy Prince that was covered with gold leaves and precious gems. The statue was placed at a height such that it overlooked the city from the top. One fine day, a swallow bird took shelter under the sculpture as he was flying to Egypt. He found out that the happy prince was not happy indeed, but was rather miserable. So, the bird asked the prince the reason for his unhappiness. The prince told him that when he was alive, he used to stay happy in his palace. He stayed uninformed of his people during his lifetime. When he died, his statue was erected high on a tall column over the city. He became sad when he started noticing the misery and sufferings of the needy people of the city. The prince's sculpture was covered with gold and many precious jewels. His body was covered with gold leaves, his eyes had two splendid sapphires, and there was an enormous red ruby that was shining on his sword handle. The sculpture of the happy prince looked marvelous and everyone praised the beauty of the statue. When the bird saw the prince's eyes filled with tears upon seeing the misery of the people, he decided to become the messenger of the prince to make him happy again. This made the prince glad that he could help the poor people with the help of the bird. At first, the prince asked the swallow to take the ruby from his sword and give it to the needy seamstress who had no money to take care of her ailing son. The bird did as commanded. The prince asked the little bird to stay and help him as he could not move from that place. On another occasion, the prince asked the bird to take out one sapphire from his eye and offer it to the poor dramatist who could not afford to make fire during winter to proceed with his composition. The playwright was feeling very weak and hungry such that he could not finish his play to deliver it to the producer on time. The bird followed the prince's instructions. One day, the prince noticed a match girl who was ruthlessly beaten by her father for allowing her matches to fall in the canal. The prince's heart was filled with pain and he promptly asked the swallow to pluck out his other eye and help the young lady. However, the swallow was unwilling to do so as this would make the prince totally visually impaired. But the prince insisted and the swallow plucked it and dipped past the match girl and slipped the gem into the palm of her hand. Thereafter, the compassionate bird chose not to leave the prince who was completely blind at this point. Despite the fact that the prince couldn't see the distress or sufferings of the people anymore, the bird stayed with the prince. Upon the instructions of the prince, the swallow removed the fine gold leaves from his body and offered it to the poor people. The bird obediently followed the prince's words and took out leaf after leaf of the gold, till the happy prince looked very dull and somber. Soon, winter came and there was snow everywhere and the bird became colder and colder. Despite being weary and cold, he didn't leave the prince. Eventually, he became frail and died from exhaustion. Just then, there was a sudden curious crack that came from inside the sculpture, as though something had broken. It was, indeed, the leaden heart of the prince that had snapped directly into pieces at the sudden demise of the sweet and kind swallow. The sculpture was therefore no more valuable and beautiful like before. It stood abandoned. When the mayor and the town councillors saw the dull statue of the prince, they pulled it down. Soon after, they melted the sculpture in a furnace, yet the broken heart didn't melt. Thus, it was rendered useless for them, so they discarded it where the dead swallow was lying. Soon, God requested one of his angels to bring the two most valuable things in the city. The angel brought the leaden heart of the prince and the dead swallow. God warmly welcomed the two beings in his garden of paradise and regarded them as his charming creations. Conclusion of the Happy Prince. The chapter The Happy Prince teaches us that we should show compassion towards the needy and help them. A house is not a home. Summary. The story revolves around Zan. He was sad as he got into a new high school. He did not have his old friends and was a junior there. He missed the old. एक पेड़ पर बैठा पक्षी कभी भी डाल टूटने से नहीं डरता है क्योंकि उसका भरोसा डाल पर नहीं बल्कि खुद के पंखों पर होता है. Please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.